All right, so I've highlighted just a few little sections that I want to go over briefly in this story before we move on to our discussion today. So I just want to point out to you some of the more so obvious, I would say, um, instances of Ronald Dahl using some of the narrative elements and some of the Gothic literature elements. Again, narrative elements, the characteristics that make up narratives, you have dialogue, figurative language, you have word choice, you have plot. All of these things combined make these stories narratives, make these into short stories. So, in the very first paragraph here, we have Dahl essentially what what we would call in secondary school, I would say, painting a picture with words. He's setting the scene. He's giving us that imagery, that figurative language that we need to put in our mind's eye what Mary Maloney has been doing, what her home is like. It's warm and clean, curtains drawn, table lamps lit. We can visualize that in our mind's eye. On the one hand, it's very opposite of what we are expecting from a Gothic literature story. We're not expecting a setting that is warm or clean or table lamps lit. We aren't expecting something cozy like that in a Gothic literature. So that's kind of how Dahl rewrites the Gothic literature elements to fit into his story here, this modern version of a Gothic literature story. Also, if we scroll down here, we will see the point in which I've highlighted that Mary Maloney actually commits her heinous act, well, really her first heinous act, in killing her husband, right? That's an element of Gothic literature. That is our character. That's her fall from grace. She goes from this, what we can assume, this docile, sweet, obedient housewife into this murderess, right? Goes up behind him, swings the frozen leg of lamb, hits him right on the head. And then here I've highlighted this section where she's actually practicing how she's going to talk to the shopkeeper, which definitely shows, keyword here, peculiar. Love that word. How peculiar she's trying not to be, right? She doesn't want to be peculiar. She's trying to cover her actions. She wants to seem normal. So she has to go to the mirror and try to seem normal. And it really shows kind of the state of Mary Malone's mind at the moment or afterwards that she's killed her husband and kind of her decay of sanity that we see. I mean, one could argue that she's even more, I guess, lucid. Here, she's being very clever. She's trying to cover her tracks, but also at the same time, we can picture this pregnant woman upstairs practicing smiling so she can cover for this awful murder that she's committed. So we'll go back to our, not this. We'll go back to our Gothic literature notes and take one more look at our discussion today. So here's what our main activity for the day is going to be. So I've each given you a note card. And on that note card, you can either do it on the back, one on each side, you can do it all on one side. Doesn't matter to me as long as you have that note card with you when we're discussing. I don't really necessarily like just letting you go as far as the discussion goes. I kind of want you to have something you can refer back to because it is really hard to discuss something spur of the moment without, like a little reminder or what have you. So on your note card, I need you to answer these two questions. Okay, which elements of Gothic literature were obvious and lamb to the slaughter for you? I've already covered some that really stuck out to me, but go through your text either on your computer or if you've printed out a version, go through it. Look at the Gothic literature elements that were obvious, ones that jumped out at you, ones that you saw. Where did you really see decay? Where did you really see atmosphere? Okay, and then the next one, a little more in depth of a question. Okay, which narrative elements created this author's style? If you'll notice, Ronald Dahl has a very unique style in this short story. So which narrative elements, is it the figurative language that gives him his style, in your opinion? Is it the way he describes things? Is it the way he creates his plot? Is it the way he, what he chooses to make his climax? Is it the way he writes his dialogue or, his thoughts of his characters? Maybe it's